What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Tuesday, August 31st. I think August has 31 days, I'm guessing. And we are getting ready to preview the NFL season. It is weird because the preseason is now shorter, and that is going to make people don't realize it is going to surprise them because there are not 4 days until the regular season start like there normally would be right now. So we have tons of time to preview it. We're going to try and find as many smart people as we can to talk about various things, particularly with a gambling focus this week. And joining us now, great friend of the show, who I think we've been podcasting with for like 10 years now, at least, Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders. What's up, buddy?
Hey, man, I'm ready for the season too, but it is a little weird this year. Like the fact that there's no games this coming weekend, no NFL games at least. I mean, there's a whole college weekend, but there's no NFL games. And the fact that cut down day is now today.
Oh, nice work. Yes, today.
Saturday.
That's right.
Right. I'm used to it being Saturday of Labor Day weekend. Now it's today. So it's like 5 days earlier than usual.
We're going to have its cut down day is today, which is Tuesday. And then there's not a game for a long time. I really think it's going to surprise people. It's not registering with the general public, I don't think, because I'm getting pelted about, we got to schedule our fantasy draft now. And I'm telling you, we got 2 weeks to figure this out.
I wonder if it's going to result in more guys getting picked up who were cut by another team because you've got a week to get those guys ready to play. You don't have only 3 days.
I think that is I think that's a good call. I think that's a great call, in fact. It'll give people more time to raise the stakes this football season with a Pick Six Podcast Pick'em pool. That's right. You can compete against me, us, other listeners for your share of bragging rights and prizes. Get started today by downloading the CBS Sports app or by visiting cbssports.com/pick6. It's simple. Sign up and remember to make weekly picks against the spread. Weekly winners get a sweet championship belt. Oh, okay. And the year-long winner gets $1,000 and a guest spot on the podcast. What? Again, that's cbssports.com/pick6 to play. Wow, that's pretty cool prizes. It's like the guy. I think it was somebody. I don't know if you heard the announcer the other day. He was doing a read. I think he was at a baseball game. He's like, it was the Cardinals radio announcer or something. He's like, make sure and stop by and get your official Busch Stadium NFT. And midway through, he's like, what is an NFT?
It's like, I know what an appearance on the podcast is. That I can actually define for you.
Right. But it's like, you're doing these reads and you get down to the bottom. You're like, whoa. I didn't see that coming. So yeah, check that out. You can get $1,000 and a guest spot on the podcast plus championship belts every week. That's pretty awesome. Speaking of contest, footballoutsiders.com is running the Losers League contest. Tell us about that, Aaron. And this, I like this. We talked about it a little bit before, but the idea that you have to figure out what's bad, right?
Right. The idea of the Loser League is to pick the worst players possible. So basically, you want the lowest score every week. You want to get the guys who get 13 carries for 34 yards with no touchdowns, or 2 catches with 12 yards and a fumble. Those are great lines, but you can't just take bench guys because if you don't hit a certain minimum number of passes or runs, you get a big penalty. So you have to pick guys who are going to play, but who are going to play badly, and try to get the lowest score every week. And we have weekly prizes this year, a lot of Football Outsiders swag, memberships in our site. And then our grand prize for the ultimate loser who has the lowest score over all 18 weeks is a trip to the big game in Los Angeles.
I'm not laughing because of the prize. A trip to the big game, because you're not allowed to reference it in the context of a prize, I believe, is the issue there. Between the two best teams in professional football as they square off.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And a PlayStation 5 for second place. Those are good prizes.
Those are pretty sweet prizes. Yeah. Now they're trying to point out you also get a chance to meet me in person at the big game. But I think it's the going to the big game that's the big prize. Meeting me is like a little icing on top of the cake, but mostly it's going to the big game.
I wouldn't want to suggest that that meeting you would not be fun. But yes, if you're like, hey, look, the only time we can meet is during the big game, the contest winners are probably going to Why don't you meet us in the stands at the big game?
I think we're going to be meeting before the big game.
Ooh, spicy.
And then I
assume it would be before.
I will be going as a media member to cover the Super Bowl.
That's right. I also hope I will be going as a media member to cover the Super Bowl. Although I would feel a lot more comfortable about it if this is not going to make any sense, but if the Super Bowl is being played in Alabama, because then I would feel like no sweat. We're having this with like a full crowd instead it's in California. By the way, and these other prizes are pretty incredible. Like you get early on Football Outsiders shirt, signed almanac, then a copy of Madden NFL 22, annual subscriptions to Football Outsiders, and a bunch of Madden Ultimate Team points, which I think are very valuable, but I don't know anything about, as well as NFL Shop gift cards. So that's cool stuff. I like this idea. Go to footballoutsiders.com/fantasy/loser-league, or just Google Football Outsiders Loser League and go sign up. I assume it's free to play, right?
It is free to play. All you'd need is a Football Outsiders account in order to play, but it is absolutely free. And we're going to have so much fun with this year because it's great to root for bad games. It's a lot of fun it gives you a reason to watch the Jets.
That's right. We don't think about bad games very often in like leading up to the season because everybody's optimistic. But once you get in the game, there are some really, really bad games. So
and this year when we ran this contest in the past, you basically picked your team for half a season at a time. Mm-hmm. Now we're doing it new every week, which means when we get into the late season, you're going to get a chance to pick up some of those like undrafted free agents who are going to be bad. Like when the guy comes in who's the fifth receiver for the Texans, like we'll have him available for you to put on your team, and it's going to be fun.
Okay, I dig that. That's awesome. And of course, by the way, you can access that free footballoutsiders.com account will also give you access to current DVOA numbers, which
a lot of people feel like we put DVOA behind a paywall. We didn't. We just put it behind a registration wall. We want you to have an Outsiders account so that you can comment on articles and so we can get in touch with you and whatnot. And then you get all of our regular stats for free still. Right.
And look, it is important for media companies to register people on their site. That's a no-brainer. So makes all the sense in the world. And if you are smart, if you are a smart football person, and hopefully you've already done this, but if you haven't and you're listening to the show and you enjoy what Aaron and I have to say, or even if you don't enjoy what we have to say, you should go and buy a copy of the Football Outsiders Almanac. It is Aaron has a copy of it in the physical copy. You can get a PDF. Show the girth on that bad boy.
This is a very large book. It's 525 pages. As I often point out, it's a wonderful football preview that also will kill all the mosquitoes in your house.
It is
over the head with it.
It is a must-have. I saw that in the press release described by multiple writers as a Bible, including the friend of the podcast, Mina Kimes. And I saw somebody else call it a Bible.
It would be funny if the actual Bible came out with a new version every year.
That would be good, actually.
We actually update it every year, so that's better than the Bible in my mind because it's constantly current.
Well, I mean, point out that you've been doing this a lot longer. You put out more editions than the actual Bible, so there you go.
This is the 17th version of our book.
I was thinking about that. So I think that you and me and Wilson started podcasting probably back when we were at AOL at Fan House. And I mean, I guess I probably have some of the older ones in my office here, but I feel like I've been reading it for 15 years.
We've been doing it for a long time. And this year it's a little bit new in that in order to get the electronic version, you have to become an FO Plus subscriber. That's our premium service. But that gets you not only the electronic version of Football Outsiders Almanac, but our big preseason fantasy draft tool, our in-season fantasy projections, along with in-season fantasy tools, our picks against the spread, our big historical stats database. All of that comes together in one subscription.
And the preseason fantasy stuff, Kubiak I use it every year. It comes in a easily manipulatable spreadsheet. Or editable spreadsheet.
It's an online tool now.
Yeah, right.
But
it used to be you would download it
to the rules of your league.
Right. You can customize it to the rules of your league. And I play in this office league where we have 26 teams and it's tight end premium and all that stuff. And so if you're playing in any of these custom leagues, you will need to having the Football Outsiders tool is key, because you can do 26 teams, and 4 flex spots, whatever it is. If you have weird leagues you play in, I highly recommend it anyway. But if you have weird leagues, definitely recommend it. Before we move on to sort of talking some futures, I'm curious, are there any players that you notice that the Kubiak projections are higher on than maybe the general public? Because I've always seen, feels like every year there's 1 or 2 guys who just sort of really stand out, and it usually ends up popping pretty well.
This may connect with what you want to talk about with futures, but like, we are higher than anyone else on the Pittsburgh Steelers offense.
Really?
I think what happened was that they were better in the second half of last year than they looked, and worse in the first half of last year than they looked. So people think they fell off a cliff in the second half, and they did decline, but I don't think it was quite as precipitous as people think. And also, history shows us that it's best to project going forward using an entire year, not just looking at the second half of the season. So we think Pittsburgh is going to be a below average offense, but not a dismal, like worst in the league offense. And they're going to pass the ball a lot, especially because the offensive line is going to be a little questionable on those running plays. We're not as high on Najee Harris as other people are. So we're really high on Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. And we just think they're going to pass the ball a lot, and they're going to put up some impressive raw passing numbers.
And even maybe Juju Smith-Schuster to an extent, just relative to the market. Because, I mean, people are not high on Juju, and really not high on Claypool or Deontay, just when you look around in fantasy. Obviously, Ben is – I mean, so do you find the Steelers to be a decent bet then to win the AFC or to even to win the Super Bowl? I mean, they're 20-1 to win the AFC and 44-1 to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I don't find them to be a great bet to win those. I mean, they're a little – I like them. I would value them better than Vegas.
Yes.
But because we also really like Baltimore, although that's going to take a hit in our next simulation because of the J.K. Dobbins injury. But because we also like Baltimore, it's like going to be hard. And Cleveland, we're not as high on as other people, but that's a good team. It's going to be hard enough to get out of their division, let alone win the whole conference.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would say, yeah. And it's the other thing about these odds too, for the Super Bowl in the conference odds, it feels like, and I think this applies to the MVP odds too. Just looking around at the market, it feels like Vegas has no interest in being torched by any sort of remote long shot. Like they're just, it's almost like they're so juiced up. You have, MVP Mahomes is 5-1, and then Rodgers and Allen are, 12-1. And to me, those numbers don't make sense relative to, to the actual percentage chance of it happening.
The Mahomes at 5-1 to me is a little absurd. Like you don't think of the leader in the odds being undervalued, but what are the odds that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league this year? 50%.
Yeah, probably. Actually, 5-1 maybe is a good value. That's
right. Like the 5-1 would be, he would be the MVP 16.7% of the time. Like in reality, the odds that he's the best quarterback are like 50% or something, and the odds that Kansas City is one of the best teams and he's one of the best quarterbacks has to be like 35 or 40. Like the odds for Mahomes to win MVP should be like 3-1 or maybe even less than that. Interesting. All right. That's a fair point. I guess basically acknowledged as the best player in the game. I guess I feel like and the most consistent. I guess I feel like if the Chiefs, in the same thing with the Super Bowl odds, if the Chiefs are going to be so low to win the conference and to win the Super Bowl, then that should be reflected in the numbers for other teams. And I don't feel like it is, like the Bills are 12-1, right? I mean, shouldn't the Bills be like 20-1 if the Chiefs are going to be 6-1? I understand. Yeah. But I understand why Vegas is taking the air out of that balloon, because they don't want to be torched by a bunch of futures, and people are still going to bet these because, we're all degens and like to gamble on football. All right. So back to the Steelers. You mentioned that the Ravens are a team you're very high on. Do you think that they are a good team to bet in the futures market, whether it's Super Bowl, division, or AFC? Yeah, I do. Especially if you can get better odds now after the Dobbins injury. I mean, the Dobbins injury hurts them, but before the Dobbins injury, our numbers actually put them ahead of Kansas City. Now, if you asked me subjectively, who do I think is the best team in the AFC?
Wow.
The answer is Kansas City, right? Like there is a good possibility that the way that our analysis works, it moves everything a little bit towards the center. We may not be fully capturing just how special Mahomes and that offense are. So I understand the idea that maybe we're wrong. The Kansas City is the best team in the AFC. But that's not because we're too high on Baltimore. I think that would be because we're too low on Kansas City. Like, I think Baltimore has a pretty sweet chance. Like, you have to consider more than just 1 year. And remember, 2 years ago, they dominated the regular season, like ridiculously good. One of the 10 best teams in the history of our DVOA stats during the regular season. And most of those players are still there. So yes, like they came back to the pack, especially in offense last year, but there's a good chance for a rebound where the offense is going to get better again. And the defense is still going to be good. And the special teams are still going to be good. That I think that if you get like 14-1 odds on them for the Super Bowl, I think that's a nice bet.
Okay. And yeah, you're right. I think the number should move with the Dobbins injury, although it matters because they are a run-heavy team, and he is a very good running back. But, I mean, it's still a running back, quasi-replaceable. We'll see how the Gus Bus and Justice Hill can do that. I wouldn't surprise me, as I noted on the podcast yesterday, if they traded for Mark Ingram, just because he knows the system. Or I think they were linked with Todd Gurley. That would – okay, I mean, whatever. But
I don't know if Todd Gurley has anything left.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, why would they go out and get Todd Gurley? It doesn't make any sense to me. I also think that part of Baltimore's value is and this probably speaks to your stats too, like relative to how they've performed. The narrative against Baltimore was, one, they were a great team in 2019. Then they lost a playoff game to the Titans, and then last year, Lamar Jackson regressed as a passer, which, he completed 9% of his passes were touchdowns in 2019. He was bound to regress. That was, and regress doesn't always mean decline. Regress just means, reverting towards the mean.
Right.
So with the rest of the division, you talked about Pittsburgh. I'm curious, Cleveland has a very good football team. The roster looks good on both sides of the ball. Their odds are a little high for me in Vegas. And part of that is because they're the Browns. Do the stats strip away anything that say, all right, maybe we should believe in this team, even though they say Cleveland on their uniforms?
No, the opposite is true. I want to believe in Cleveland, but I think that our stats from last year suggest they're not as good as people think they are. And they were last year the second worst team by DVOA to ever go 11-5.
Wow.
Right? Remember, they were outscored by their opponents during the regular season. And I went and looked in the offseason. I went and looked to see whether teams the reason they were outscored in part was because they had a couple of really big losses early in the season. And I went to look for other teams that had a lot of their sort of negative point differential stuffed into 2 or 3 games. And I didn't find any indication that we should believe that they're better than their point differential or their DVOA, just because a lot of their bad performance was stuffed into 2 or 3 games. So what you're left with is a team that really should have been a 500 team last year that got a little better, not an 11-5 team that got a little better. Like, they got a little better, but they also got rid of some players. People talk about everything they brought in on defense, but they also got rid of some good defensive players. And I don't see any real reason to believe their offense is going to be better than last year. It was a top 10 offense last year. It'll be a top 10 offense this year. But I feel like they are like a 9-8 team, not like a Super Bowl contender. And I want to be wrong, because I love their front office and I love the way that they've embraced analytics. But just based on past performance, they just were not a really great team last year.
Isn't it ironic that it's like the analytics heavy teams is you're down on them because of analytics? And I agree. Kevin Stefanski, I think, embraces and embodies how a head coach should use analytics, and in a way that isn't, like overly rah-rah, or even, like he just does what he does, and he speaks eloquently about it. And he's a good poster boy for analytics. Andrew Berry, of course, doing a great job with that front office and with that roster. But I think you're right. There's a chance, especially if Pittsburgh doesn't stink this year, there's a good chance that the Browns sort of take a step back. when you looking at these numbers, I'm going to have to assume that the Seahawks, who by the DVOA playoff odds report has a 5% chance, to win the Super Bowl, that you look at the Seahawks and see some value, even in a division that's pretty tough, because they are the top team in the NFC West by that ranking. But not by
by our numbers, Seattle is the top team in the NFC West. So that's where the value is. And then we have the Rams lower than perception. And I think we have the 49ers about equal with perception. I mean, that is the best division in the league, no doubt. But I think Russell Wilson is good enough that he covers a lot of ills.
Sure. So you think essentially that their defense, you believe in everything about that team, all the problems and issues that they have, but it's just they've got Russ and he will take care of that.
Well, we think their defense is going to be a little bit better than I think people believe it's going to be. If you look at their defensive performance last year, it improved in the second half of the year while their offense was declining. So overall, for the whole year, their defense was better than people think it was. And there's still plenty of talent in the front seven there. So I think we like their defense better than most people do. But yeah, mostly it's just Russell Wilson. I mean, we have them with the number 4 projected offense. He's just really, really good.
How do you, when you have an offensive coordinator change like that, what are the kind of inputs and outputs, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, you usually take a step back when you go to a new scheme. All other things being equal, you usually take a little bit of a step back. Obviously, there's lots of situations in which you don't. I mean, last year's Rams defense being a good example, but all other things being equal, you do take a little of a step back with a new coordinator.
I'm curious about San Francisco as well. You have them; they look like they're a team that 8th in DVOA, like y'all's percentages to win the Super Bowl at 3.9%, which is, by the way, a reminder that it's really hard to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like 3.9% is high. It's top 10 for y'all, and it doesn't. Actually, I'll just to veer in a different direction very quickly. Do you think that this is a year, because you guys have the Bucks at 17.7, which is absurd? Is this a year again where we're looking at top heavy teams dominating, or like the chalk wins, or do you think no?
No, it's hard to say before the season gets going. I don't think it's any more top heavy than usual. The Bucks just happen to be really strong and have a really easy schedule.
Helps to win the Super Bowl and not
really strong teams.
If you win the division, if you're a wild card team that wins the Super Bowl and you bring all your starters back, you're in a pretty good spot in the next year because you have a second.
Yeah, especially when the other big competitor in your division lost their Hall of Fame quarterback, even if he wasn't playing as good as in the past last year, right? Like, I mean, losing Breeze is a thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Even if he's just banging slants into Michael Thomas's belly, it's still a thing for sure. But so on the 49ers and the Rams at 8th and 10th, respectively, in the DVOA rankings. And you can go see these at footballoutsiders.com. Of course, sign up for a free account. You get access to the stats. How do you see the Jimmy G and Trey Lance thing playing out? Do you have anything in the database about two quarterbacks being used at the same time across multiple?
Not really. It's pretty rare, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Overall, rookie quarterbacks tend to struggle.
Yep.
Even first rounders tend to struggle. So even though everybody out there in Twitter land believes the 49ers would be better off if they switched to Trey Lance right now, our projection would go down if they switched from Garoppolo to Trey Lance as the starter.
For 17 weeks or 17 games.
Yeah, because you have to expect that rookie quarterbacks struggle. Like you have to project them to be below average, even though some of them won't be. On average, they will be bad. So Garoppolo's numbers have been great. Now, listen, we want to say that a lot of that is because of the scheme and it's because of Shanahan, and therefore Lance won't be your run-of-the-mill rookie quarterback because the Shanahan scheme boosts numbers up. I mean, we want to say that, but we don't have statistical evidence for that. So we can't put that in our statistical projection system,
Sure. Makes sense. The Rams with Stafford, moving from Goff to Stafford. I mean, what kind of, I'm just curious. I mean, I assume maybe didn't have projections for Goff for the season, but like how much of a difference is that? Not in terms of, or
not as big a difference, I think, as conventional wisdom believes. If you look at the stats, last year Stafford was a lot better than Goff. The year before he was better, but in a limited sample. The year before Goff was better.
Yeah.
And so it's tough because some of it has to do with just how many years in the back, how many years in the past are you looking at? And the fact is, Stafford has never really been a top 10 quarterback in this league. Now, we can, again, this is subjective. We can believe that McVay's scheme is going to turn him into a top 10 quarterback. But until we see that happen, it's not like we have a ton of evidence that McVay turns guys into top 10 quarterbacks. We have one piece of evidence. We have Goff. That's the only evidence we have. Right. Until we see it happen with more than one guy, we don't have a lot of evidence that it's going to happen with more than one guy. So Stafford is better than Goff, I think, but I don't think that you saw people like doing polls about top 10 quarterbacks in the league where people were putting Stafford in the top 10, even putting him in the top 5. Like, he's just never been that guy. Now,
I mean, I have to admit, I'm a massive Matthew Stafford homer. I just love Stafford. And I think that he will get into the Hall of Fame by virtue of playing with McVay assuming he can play X number of years and win, expectation. But I definitely agree. Like the hype around Stafford leading into this season has gotten a little spun out of control.
Yeah, and the other thing is that their defense, right, once again is getting used to a new coordinator, and they lost some talent. If people are going to say, look at the Browns and all the talent that they added on defense, then you have to say, look at the Rams and the talent they lost, because that talent all went to the Browns, yeah. Right? If you're going to give the Browns credit for adding Troy Hill and John Johnson, then you have to penalize the Rams for losing Troy Hill and John Johnson. You cannot both say, oh, well, the Rams defense is fine. They didn't lose anybody. And, oh, the Browns defense is awesome. Look at who they added from the Rams.
Right. No, I mean, it's the Rams, by virtue of trading away draft picks and by virtue of having a just stars and scrubs type of roster and having to pay Jared Goff a stupid amount of money this year, even though he's not on the roster, weren't able to retain some of their top end free agents. I mean, that's that's sort of how, that's why there's a salary cap and that's how that works. Yeah. Do you perceive, I mean, clearly you perceive the Rams to be a Super Bowl contender, but any interest in betting on them and or the 49ers at their odds?
No, I mean, I think we have the 49ers about at what the odds are in Vegas, and we have the Rams lower than what their odds are. We would not bet on the Rams.
And of course, with the Seahawks there's no value in that division really either.
Well, it's the Seahawks. If we were going to bet on one of those three teams, it would be the Seahawks.
Right. There's no value on the two favorites to win the division. The Seahawks probably do present value, and as much as Pete Carroll wants to drag that team down, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't blame anybody.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about coach quality. I mean, the thing about Pete Carroll is he's a good example of how in the analytics world, we cannot judge coaches solely by the stuff that we do analytics on. Because the fact is, when it comes to the stuff we don't have analytics on, Pete Carroll's very good. He's very good at influencing his team. He's very good at coaching them up. Right.
You don't have a coach him up.
No, we don't have a variable for that. But but on the other hand, he doesn't pass enough. He doesn't go for it on fourth downs enough. That's the stuff that analytics can measure. But the stuff that analytics doesn't measure is where Pete Carroll excels.
And that's sort of why Pete Carroll, I always push back on it a little. I understand that analytics does not like Pete Carroll as a coach because of his methodology, but like the dude just gets wins. Now, granted, he does have Russell Wilson. That helps a lot. Yeah. Okay, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll look at some value plays and maybe some long shots in the Super Bowl market. So again, as I mentioned, I don't think that there's an inherently great amount of value in. I was just perusing Caesar's Super Bowl odds, and I mean, it's just tough to find. It's like tough to find a great amount of value because, you can look at the teams that are down at the bottom. I mean, nobody's taken, once you get down past about 50-1, there's not a ton of value. As I said, the Steelers at 40-1, they have a tough division. The Broncos are at the same price, but I think there's a little bit of interest for me in the middle of this market, specifically with two teams, and they show up on the DVOA report. And I'm assuming that one of these teams shows up because Football Outsiders is a programmed robot, a homer that loves the New England Patriots. I kid. But you guys are always higher on the Patriots. Like, you get flack every year. It's like,
not last year. Last year, I think we were lower on the Patriots than most people were.
Okay, there you go. They are checking at number 7 overall, 4% chance of winning the Super Bowl. I think that the market is a little bit low on the Patriots as well. They're 30-1 to win the Super Bowl now, and you can get them at a good price to win their division too. I think the Bills will probably win the division, but I like that the Patriots have depth at quarterback now. We don't know if it'll be Cam or Mac. They added a ton of skill position guys in the offseason. Jacoby Myers is a year older, and that defense should take a big step forward, or at least regress back to the mean, if only because of the guys who opted out last year.
Because of my respect for the Buffalo Bills, the bet that I like is Patriots to make the playoffs.
Oh, I like that.
Because then it doesn't matter if the Bills are better than them. And I think that that's a really good bet. Patriots to make the playoffs. You can get positive odds in a lot of places still.
Yes.
So in other words, lower than 50-50. And we have the Patriots making the playoffs, something like 62% of simulations.
Oh, wow.
One of the things we use in our defensive projections is a variable that's net value added on defense. So looking at personnel changes. Last year's Patriots had the biggest net value subtracted of any defense of the last 20 years.
Wow.
This year's Patriots have the biggest net value added of any defense of the last 20 years. When you look at Hightower coming back, plus Matt Judon and Devon Godchaux and Jalen Mills and so on and so on and so on, they add a ton of talent on defense.
Yeah. I mean, they stunk on defense last year. And that's not because, people are like, oh, Tom Brady left, and that's why Belichick's team didn't make the playoffs. Well, I mean, it's not like Bill Belichick forgot how to coach defense. He is still the greatest defensive coach in the history of football.
Lost a lot of guys. And they had absurd level of takeaways in 2019. And you knew that was not going to continue.
Sure. Yeah. So Patriots, yay or nay on a Super Bowl bet at 30-1 or better?
I mean, yay, but I'd rather do the bet that's a nice little long shot bet, but a more realistic bet, I think, is to make the playoffs.
I tweeted this actually a couple of weeks ago. People got mad at me. I was like, dude, the Patriots at plus money to make the playoffs is a smart move, especially when you look at the market, and there are only, I think, 5 teams in the AFC, the last I checked, who are minus money to make the playoffs. That leaves it may have been 4 actually. And that leaves a lot of spots for teams for a team like the Patriots to steal a spot in the playoffs. And I agree with you on the Bills. I like their over win total. I think y'all's mean projection is like 10-6. But I tend to look at them as maybe more of a 12-13 win team. And maybe you do too.
Our win projection totals tend to be a little too grouped around 500. Like, it's something I need to work on. It's figuring out why they group so heavily around 500.
Sure.
I'll add one more thing about the Patriots. They have the easiest projected schedule in the league.
Oh, yeah.
And the Bills, by the way, have one of the easiest projected schedules in the league. So getting back to the Bills, the Bills are a really good team. They're really good.
They're like the AFC South and the NFC South, I think, right? I mean, that's playing those. I think that's correct. If that is right, you get. I mean, you're talking. In my opinion, 5 wins. The
AFC South is, in my mind, the AFC South is the worst division in the league. And the NFC South has got other than Tampa Bay is lower down. So absolutely, it's an easy schedule.
Yeah,
plus the Jets twice.
Yeah, Jets twice, and the Dolphins are actually check in. That's the other team I was going to ask about. You have the Dolphins at I lost it there. You have the Dolphins
average.
Yeah, 14th in turn. Yeah, so slightly above average. Probably not worth anything at 30-1, the same price as the Patriots to win the Super Bowl. But you do have them ahead of the Browns in terms of winning the Super Bowl. And right there, the Vikings in the NFC. Now that's a team that I can get behind, even though I don't.
Yeah, I mean, with the asterisk that, of course, we wrote this book before everything has happened to the Vikings. All kinds of weird things have happened to the Vikings in the preseason, mostly revolving around COVID. But
right,
this is a team that in a lot of stats that tend to regress towards the mean were really, really bad last year.
Sure.
In ways that are likely to get better, like special teams and defensive injuries and offense on third downs. Like a lot of things are likely to get better for them for this year.
I have a hard time, and this is why I was glad to hear. I believe that Josh Allen is vaxxed. I know, obviously, I feel like I talk about vaxxed every freaking podcast, but it matters to me. If I'm betting on the Vikings, I don't want to bet on the Vikings if Kirk Cousins is not vaxxed and could miss X number of games. Now, he might not miss them, but if you were told that there's you're essentially increasing the possibility of him suffering an injury and having to miss 2 weeks of games by betting on and I don't want to bet on a quarterback who might miss games. I mean, that's just as simple as that.
Yep, I'm fully with you. It is absolutely going to be an issue all year long and something we have to talk about. And it's not political. It's all about winning money.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, we're on the same board. So you're higher on the Vikings from a projection standpoint, but wouldn't want to take them in terms of.
It turns out that what I thought was higher than conventional wisdom is not that much higher than conventional wisdom. Last time I saw, I think not to make the playoffs or win the Super Bowl. I think the bet I might take is the over under.
Okay.
Last time I saw it was 8.5. And our projection had them with a mean of 9.1 wins, which is, not the biggest difference, but it's if I was going to bet 5 or 6 overs, that's probably one of the ones I would bet.
Okay. I don't know that I trust Kirk Cousins to make a Super Bowl run, or that I trust the Vikings to up in the Packers with Aaron Rodgers now back. When you start looking down the board a little bit, the Saints 30-1. I know you're not as
I like the Saints.
Yeah,
we're big on the Saints defense. I know they lost some people, but that still has been a really good, consistently good defense. And I don't think the people they lost were necessarily that important. And Jameis Winston has always been an average quarterback, except for the year he threw the 30 picks. He's always been slightly above average. The idea that Jameis Winston sucks is just wrong. Yeah.
And he's, I don't remember, remember when Harbaugh took over San Francisco and all of a sudden Alex Smith started changing the way he dressed and changing the way he talked. What Sean Payton's doing with Jameis Winston reminds me of that. Former number 1 overall pick, never fully realized the potential. And you get the quarterback makeover from a QB guru, sits on the bench and learns. And now we know he can throw. If you fix his decision making, and that's sort of what I'm getting at here, is all of a sudden you fix his decision making or change his mentality, they could unlock something and be a definite Super Bowl threat.
I mean, Michael Thomas being injured absolutely hurts them, first half of the season or however long he's out. There's no question about it. But if they have with Winston are the 14th best offense in the league, and you combine that with the defense that we think they have, that is a playoff team.
Absolutely. So I think you would then like the Saints if they were any kind of plus money or just, minus 120 to make the playoffs, plus maybe a little stab at Super Bowl at 30-1, right?
Yeah, it's a fun little long shot stab. Again, sort of like the Patriots, I like to make the playoffs as my favorite bet because I have so much faith in a team being ahead of them in their own division.
Right. It's the quarterback situation might be fixed this year. Trust the head coach. We think the defense is going to be good again this year. And there's just another team that's a lot better than I'm not willing to fade in that division.
Yeah. And that's the way I feel about the Patriots is the way I feel about the Saints. Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree with that completely. We've been talking about the Steelers. Does the Washington football team to win the Super Bowl intrigue you at all at 50-1?
Not really.
Okay. How about the Philadelphia Eagles at 80-1?
Slightly.
Oh, well, Devo is producer. Devo is an Eagles fan, so I'm curious how Football Outsiders looks at Philly this year.
They're bad. 80-1 is pretty long odds, though. I mean,
yeah. You're in Bengals. You're after you get past 80-1 here on Caesars, it's the Bengals, Jags, and Jets, Lions, Texans at 125. I mean, that's right. 80-1 is a long shot.
Yeah. If you ask me of those 6 teams, which would be the most likely to do it, I guess I would say Philly, but those are all super long shot bets.
Yeah. The 80-1 teams are Panthers, Raiders, Eagles, and Giants.
Oh, Raiders.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Of those teams, yeah. I feel that the Raiders are the most mediocre team in the league. And at 80-1, that's good.
So mediocre is a compliment in this context.
Mediocre. Well, if you're projected to be really bad, if conventional wisdom thinks you're going to be really bad, mediocre is better than bad. It's average.
So
they're very average. They're slightly above average on offense. They're slightly below average on defense. They're very bland. They don't really have stars. Like, they're just there.
Okay.
Now, I know that's not what they wanted when they gave Gruden all that money.
Right.
But of the teams that you just read to me, which do I think is the most likely to make this a Super Bowl run? It would be that something finally clicked for the Raiders and that they made a run.
Boy, wouldn't that be something?
It's not likely.
No. And
but again, I think it's more likely than the Eagles or the Giants.
And again, that's sort of my beef. And I'm not like complaining about, Caesar's odds here. I mean, set the odds what you want. People are going to bet them. And, these are generally the same across the board. But I was saying on the podcast a few weeks ago with the Bengals, 125-1 to win the Super Bowl. That's just not good odds. The Bengals should be like 500-1 to win the Super Bowl. Right?
Who's at 500-1?
I'm saying the Bengals should be like 500-1 to win the Super Bowl.
I think 125-1 might be closer to it. I mean, they do have the guy who was the number one pick a year ago.
Oh, so you maybe like a little bounce back from Cincinnati?
Well, I mean, 125-1 isn't a good team, so I don't know how much bounce back that is. Yeah, I mean, they could go 7-10.
Okay. Back to the AFC West very quickly. The Chargers at 30-1. Any interest in them at all?
That's the team that we are lower on than everybody else.
How come?
Because I think people are expecting a huge second-year leap from Herbert, but Herbert was already so good in his first year that players who are that good as rookies don't take second-year leaps. There's nowhere
to jump to.
There is. I mean, he could be Dan Marino,
right?
But he could also be Dak Prescott, right? Who Dak Prescott really declined in his second year. If you look on average at the top 12 quarterbacks in Football Outsiders stats since '83, the top 12 rookies, on average, they were a little bit worse the next year because they were already so good that central tendency was a stronger influencer than a second-year leap. And on defense, I think there's this belief that Staley's going to turn them into the best defense in the league because he did that with the Rams. But the Rams were 9th in DVOA when Staley took them over, and he took them from 9th to 4th. That's not a huge improvement.
Right.
The Chargers were like 23rd last year. It's very different than the Rams defense he was taking over. And yes, Derwin James, yes, I know, Derwin James, very good. If healthy, yes. But I don't want to depend on the Derwin James if healthy until Derwin James is healthy.
And same thing with Joey Bosa. I mean, Joey Bosa, if Joey Bosa and Derwin James play 17 games, the Chargers defense will probably be top 10 in the league. But, those are two pretty big Jenga pieces. And you pull those guys out for a couple of games each, and all of a sudden you lose everything on the back end with Derwin, or you just quietly don't have any depth at pass rusher with Melvin.
And I don't think, as important as those guys are, I don't think they're as important as Donald and Ramsey.
I would agree with that as well. Okay, that's fair enough. All right, is there anybody that I as a host erroneously neglected to ask you about that you think could present value as a Super Bowl bet?
As a Super Bowl bet, no. The over-under that I like is the Detroit Lions, especially if you can get them at 4.5.
Please don't say the over.
Over 4.5, yes.
Okay, talk me into taking Dan Campbell.
Don't you believe that Matt Patricia was maybe the worst coach in the league?
Yeah.
And seriously dragged that team down? So if you believe that, don't you have to believe that they'll get a little better with a new head coach?
So this is one of my favorite theories, but it's the dead cat bounce.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, you're like a dead cat is landing on the cement and bouncing back up because it's.
Yeah, I wouldn't go anywhere near the Lions to make the playoffs, Lions to win the Super Bowl, none of that stuff. No, and I know that in some places it's gone to 5. It's not as good a bet if it's at 5.
Right.
But at 4.5, the possibility that this Lions team, remember what I also said about Goff and Stafford. I think Goff is a little bit better than conventional wisdom believes. The idea that they can go 5-12 or 6-11, I think they're more likely to go 5-12 or 6-11 than they are to go 4-13 or 3-14.
Okay. I mean, and I, there is for smart people, there is a long held belief that almost anybody can win 5 games in the NFL. It's not that hard. Like the idea that somebody's going to go 0-17 is kind of ludicrous because
it takes a lot of bad luck to be
yes,
that bad.
yes. Traditionally speaking, even terrible football teams will stumble into a win or two here or there. So yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I just don't feel, like the Texans too. They're over under 4. Just neither one of them feels particularly comfy having the over.
Different because the Texans feel like such a garbage fire right now.
They do feel like a garbage fire.
With the Lions, part of my argument is not an analytical argument, but a psychological one. If you really believe that Patricia had so many players angry at him, and now that there's a coach that the players like better, and there's coordinators, and the word has come out of Detroit, they like the coordinators better, and they like Aaron Glenn, and they like, right? That's the opposite situation of Houston. In Houston, it's a garbage fire, right? Yes. So like all the analytics have them down, and then also psychologically, it's a mess. With the Lions, I feel like there's that dead cat bounce.
Okay. The Detroit Lions, ladies and gentlemen. Aaron Schatz is one of your.
I know I seem to be big on the Lions every year, so I'm going to get a reputation for this after a while, and they're probably going to prove me wrong again. But again, it's not Lions to make the playoffs or win the Super Bowl. It's Lions to win 5 games.
Right, and you could win 5 games and be the worst team in football in 2021. But
the worst team in the history of DVOA won 4 games.
Who was that?
The 2005 49ers.
Oh, wow.
When they lost by like 50 points.
That's amazing.
And then they won 4 games by like a field goal.
I was worried you were going to say the 2010 Panthers. I don't remember how many games they won. But that team was bad. That offense was very bad. Defense was fine, though, I guess. Yeah. All right, man. Make sure and go to footballoutsiders.com. You can sign up for your free account. You can register and play in the Losers League for a chance to go and meet Aaron Schatz at the big game in Los Angeles in next February. Also, get the Football Outsiders Almanac. As you can tell, we've been referencing a lot. It's not summer anymore, but you got 2 weeks to read it, and it is thick, robust, and has a great writing. It's not just great insight; it's great writing too. You get a bunch of the smartest minds. So you find young talent too. The Aaron Schatz, I don't know, is it the Aaron Schatz coaching tree or the FO?
My coaching tree is wide and has many names on it. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like Bill Barnwell, Mike Tanier, all pal Andy Benoit now with the Rams. It's spent time writing for it as well.
Doug Farrar.
Doug Farrar, of course.
Who works in the Browns front office. Yep.
Yeah. In fact, it's too long to even really to name everybody. And if I left somebody off, my apologies. But make sure and check that out. Thank you as always for your time, buddy. Love talking to you every year, and pumped for some football. Maybe some fans in the stands too.
Yes, I love being on, and I'm ready for the season. So let's do it.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
All right.